Alright, so I just finished my first session of Diablo 4 on the beta, and of course made a rogue, and I got to level 25 as soon as I possibly could. Now I only disconnected 4 times, I only spent about 3 hours or so in queue. That's a pretty successful night if you ask me. I want to give you guys a quick little overview of what my first impressions are so far of Diablo 4. And of course I'm basing this on the overall gameplay, but also the rogue class that I tried. So let's get into it, shall we? Now the first few levels are quite slow. You don't really have any abilities, you start only with your basic ability. Now the biggest issue I had early on was I couldn't bound my force move to my scroll wheel, because that's just buggy for some reason. So that definitely did not help me at the first few levels, as I was trying to scroll wheel to move and nothing just happened. Now I was playing the game on veteran, also playing with the tips removed, but I actually still kind of know where to go almost at any time. The game was pretty good at showing you where to go, and I almost didn't get lost at all. So I'd say an overall intuitiveness in terms of where you're going in terms of dungeons actually felt very nice. And of course, later as you progress more and more, you unlock more skills, and you also fight harder and harder bosses. Now the bosses actually are extremely fun. They're for the most part quite basic, but they're actually quite punishing, at least on veteran. You have to be quite careful, you have to use your dodge ability a lot, have to avoid the mechanics. It actually felt very nice. But I also encountered early on that if you don't choose the correct spells, like I felt like the barrage I had chosen actually wasn't a very good spender at all. So I felt very weak in the first few levels. So it definitely seems like there's a bit of imbalancing in terms of what spells and how much damage they do. I'm sure they can fix that later. Now, a bit later on, once I swapped to a melee build, of course I tried multiple different spells, almost tried all the different spenders. But once I swapped to a melee build, the rogue felt fantastic. The range with the barrage was pretty clunky, but the melee spells are working really well, and they have great synergy. The main ability I had here was Twisting Blades, and it had a ton of utility and mobility along with it, and they all utilized and synergized with each other. And it wasn't about until level 15 or so, and I chose these abilities and had enough spell points so I should use them, that I felt like the game was really good. The first few levels I was kinda meh about it, but once I had enough spell points to unlock these and I tried this melee build, it felt extremely fun. I also highly recommend, if you are playing a rogue, definitely try this build out. I have a video guide as well on this build I was playing, so make sure to check that video out as well. Now the quests are pretty simple. A lot of the quests are go and talk to this guy, find this item, or if you're in some kind of dungeon or an event, it's go click these 2 items and bring it to a certain spot in the map. But of course it's just act 1. We of course don't know if they're adding more different kind of quest lines in the next few acts. They might add multiple different quest lines and how the quests work, of course. I would assume that they're just adding just a few basic quests just so we don't overwhelm people too much in the early games, because that could definitely happen if there's too many different spells, abilities, passives, and of course also quest lines. So I feel like they did a pretty good job in terms of not overwhelming the player. Now the skill tree is a little bit difficult to understand at first. There's a lot of different nodes. You don't really know where to go from the start, so you can't just pick and choose in the blind. So it's definitely a bit overwhelming there, but overall it felt pretty decent once you got a further understanding of the skill tree. Now so basically there's like 4 different kinds of content. You have of course the main quests, you have side quests, and then you have dungeons and events. These are kind of like the main objectives you complete throughout the game, at least so far in Act 1, where you of course earn experience, gold. Now the main quest line actually felt very nice. It was smooth sailing, no issues at all. But some of the side quests and the objectives especially were quite buggy, and sometimes just wouldn't spawn at all. Like you'd go to an area in the map and just nothing would happen, just stand there for like a few minutes and just nothing happening. It might just be a beta thing, and of course, you know, less effort on these side quests compared to the main storyline. I had no issues there at all, but there were definitely a few buggy things. Now since this of course was the beta and we only have access to Act 1, I finished that about level 17 or so, and I got the rest of the levels after from just completing bonus objective, rerunning the dungeons, whatever I can find. But I'm definitely looking forward to unlocking more and seeing more of the quest line. And I think overall the thing I enjoyed the most was the gameplay of the melee rogue, and then also the boss fights. I actually really enjoyed those. They were well thought out, but without being too overcomplicated. There's some good mechanics that really proved to be a struggle, but it was only a few of them. They were quite simple. So overall my default build experience was pretty good. Now of course I did spend quite a few hours in queue times, which is not ideal. Now like I said before, some of the bonus objectives and the side quests were quite buggy, but I feel like I got a good understanding what the game is going to be like. The core mechanics were really working well. Now it didn't feel entirely like a Diablo game. Of course there were a few things that were similar, but it also felt like other games, like a part PoE, part Lost Ark. It's kind of a mixture of entire bag. That's not a bad thing at all. It's just a different kind of scenario for sure. Now if you're coming from D2 or D3, there's a chance you might not enjoy this game. it is very, very different. There is quite a bit of running. There's quite a bit of just open map where nothing is really happening. But overall, I would say that I had a pretty good experience, especially with the melee rogue build. I definitely cannot recommend that build enough. That was a blast to play. I'm going to keep playing that as well. Would highly recommend it. Now, is this the game that's going to kill Diablo 3, kill Diablo 2? I don't really know yet. We only had the first act. We're only trying the leveling. We haven't tried in-game content at all. But I would say so far that the core mechanics and the combat actually works pretty well. And that is what I was looking for in the beta. They can always add more content later on as they are making expansions or whatnot. So everything I was looking for actually was fulfilled by having good core gameplay. So I'm very satisfied with my Diablo 4 beta experience. If you want to see more of my Diablo 4 content, make sure to check out the video on screen now, as I'm sure you also find that video very useful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the other video. Peace.